Did you know that more than 90% of you are not subscribed? Let's fix that. Those are rookie numbers. Alright, welcome back to another anime review. I'm gonna be honest, this one is gonna be interesting to try and break down. Instead of stringing you along forever, I mean you've already read the title, but the show we are covering today is the show Hyouka, a 22-episode slice-of-life mystery show. Now this one's a first for me. I don't really delve into the mystery genre, not just in anime, but just in general. It's not really my kind of story just because, it takes a lot of brain power to really try and keep up with it. This is one I never heard of until it just popped up on my screen, as in typical fashion for myself. Instead of continuing down the list of stuff that I need to watch or read, I just browse on Crunchyroll and then click the thing that looks the most interesting to me, instead of watching stuff that I know I should watch, because that's just how I am. And just based off, the thumbnails and I try not to read too much. I don't like to read the synopsis of stuff. I literally just like to see, alright, pretty much judging a book by its cover, but, it's anime, so I like to be surprised. I do usually read the first sentence just to maybe get an idea of what to expect. Right away, this show hooked me just because within the first 5 seconds, there was a really good orchestra run. The music just really hooked me right away and I was just okay, you got my attention. Basic plot breakdown of Hyouka. We follow our main character Oriki as he's going into high school, and he's someone who doesn't like to do a whole lot. He prides himself on being able to conserve energy. A lot of people may have their rosy, pink, bright-colored worlds. He prefers the gray tone. And before, one day when he's going off to high school, his sister leaves him a note to say to check out the Classic Literature Club. And so he's just alright, whatever. He goes there, and then he meets this girl named Chitanda Eru. And she seems kind of shy, timid, but curious about why he's there. And through many antics and talking to each other about certain stuff, Chitanda gets on the topic of her uncle, who she never got to say goodbye to because as far as they were concerned, he passed away a long time ago. And then we jump right into the first arc of the story, and we get to see that Mr. Oriki has a very good Sherlock Holmes analytical type brain. Pretty much is one of those shows and series where these kids are way too smart to be high school students. We have our main dude Oriki, we have the main girl Chitanda, and then the other two, Ibara and Satoshi. Satoshi and Ibara went to the same school as Oriki at middle school, and it's just this nice group of friends who you see meet for the first time, and by the end it's they're a solid group. And it's interesting watching this now after watching Haruhi Suzumiya for the first time, because now I find myself sort of just having that in my brain and sort of comparing this to that in a way. But if you want the truth, I enjoyed this more. Haruhi had its moments, but I found myself enjoying the characters in this a lot more. I very much like Chitanda, just more of the curious, just bright, bubbly character as opposed to the sharp tsundere Haruhi. Can you even call her a tsundere? But I mean, it shouldn't compare those two. I like to keep my reviews pretty spoiler free. I will talk about the ending a little bit and then I'll put a spoiler warning, but I mean, you need to go into this not knowing anything, because the whole mystery side of it. Again, I'm someone when I watch mystery things or read mystery things, I'm not someone who's trying to figure it out with them. I know that's kind of the point, but I'm just sort of more interested in seeing them figure it out, so it's I'm figuring it out alongside with them. I mean, just mainly because I'm not someone who can put all those pieces together, because it's I'm trying to take in the plot of the story, the characters and everything, while also it's just an extra thing that I'm just not thinking about. Well, I mean, of course, I've said I've never really consumed mysteries. I mean, I have, but the main plot thing of this story is mystery. But unlike other stuff I've watched, Death Note, Monster, all those different stories, obviously there's a mystery element to those, but it's more focused on the supernatural aspect of those. Whereas in this, there's no supernatural aspect at all. It does lean into that a lot though, because Chitanda believes that there's some supernatural stuff that's happening in certain scenes and arcs, and then it goes to Oriki to break it down in a real world perspective. There is one gripe I have with this show though, and I don't know if it's similar in the manga. Again, I haven't read the manga, I'm pretty much an anime child, but when we jump between the end of one arc and go into the next one, you don't really get that closure at the end. The last episode of each big mystery arc, because I think there's four-ish, four big ones over the course of the whole series. It's sort of just the last episode of those would be they finally figure it out, and then there's a thing in Oriki's mind where he talks about it, and then it ends and then there's not really set up for the next thing. It just sort of just next episode you jump into the next thing. But I do kind of like that. I mean, in this story, they make references and talk a lot about, like, you know, Sherlock Holmes and a lot of other, like, famous mystery stories that, you know, obviously exist in the real world. So I get, like, it's kind of like that in a way, because, like, in those kind of stories, it's similar as well, where it's, like, different books that are in the same series, but just different stories. So maybe it's kind of going for that kind of pacing, but I don't know. I just wasn't used to that. Because there are many, like, arcs that would end where it's like Oriki's figured it out, but, like, he hasn't told anyone else. Did none of them ever talk about that? Or at the very least, was it off screen? Like, it's, I don't know. That's, like, my one gripe with it. Other than that, the biggest praises I can give to this is, one, the music, which was, like, the biggest thing. It was amazingly composed. Yeah, I'm just looking at, like, the composer's, like, other works. The composer is Kohei Tanaka. They've done Dragon Ball stuff. Yeah, they've done some Gundam stuff. Pokemon, One Piece, Hero Vampire. Okay, I definitely hear that. They've done some JoJo. They've done a lot. Yeah, it's definitely opened my ear now to some more of their work. And then, of course, this series was amazingly animated by Kyoto Animation, which I've thrown it around now. Like, obviously, Mappa and Ufotable are in the limelight in recent years, but Kyoto, I think, is still slept on. I mean, to be fair, they haven't done really too much in, like, recent years, because again, like, this series came out in 2012. Like, I made a comparison a long time ago that Cloverworks has kind of become, like, the new age Kyoto, where it's like they're handling more of, like, the slice of life romance stories. I mean, but I have noticed that Kyoto does do a lot of, like, those high school ragtag gang of kids, like, just doing their own, like, romance stuff. You know, there's Haruhi Suzumiya, there's Chunibyo, there's Clanad. It's interesting to see certain studios that, you know, have that, like, overlapping theme in the stuff they adapt. But again, going back to Hyouka, I was expecting more romance in it, but honestly, the amount of romance that was in it's more towards the last couple episodes where it's just like, oh yeah, I guess there is romance. Because, like, you don't really think about it, and I'm gonna be honest, you don't really need it for this story. Because again, it's more of a mystery story, and it's like, there is romance there, obviously, between our two main characters. But now I'm gonna talk about the ending a little bit. I'm gonna try to keep it vague, but for safety, spoiler warning. But in the ending of the last episode, there's a scene between Oriki and Chitanda. It's the last scene. Oriki says a line of just like, oh, it's still cold out, and then Chitanda reminds him just like, it's not, it's the middle of spring. Well, then even before that, there's a scene that in his head where he's just like, hey, what if I, like, do this thing? It's played out like he said that out loud, but then it cuts back and it's like, no, he just said that in his head. In that moment, it could be interpreted as just like, okay, like, he obviously feels that way towards her and he wants to stay around her more, but he realized just like, we have all this time still. It's like, there's no need to rush things. And then with the whole, like, him saying it's cold, but it's the middle of spring, it's just like showing that he's finally at least started to let go of, like, that whole just energy conserving, just gray outlook on life, and now he's accepted the rosy look of life. I think there's even a line he says where he's just like, oh, is this what the world looks like to all of you? And, like, everything, like, is rose petaled. The visualizations in this show are actually really good as well, because, like, when he first meets Chitanda and she's, like, going crazy about, like, I'm curious about this thing, and, like, she, like, becomes like poison ivy, wraps, like, her hair around him. You know, it's a visualization thing to be like, she's not letting you go until you indulge her. Like, just going into it initially, I didn't think I would like it as much as I did. Like, I thought this would end up being one of those shows where it's just like, I would watch the first episode, but then going forward, I would start, like, fast forwarding. But no, I watched this in its entirety because it hooked me. The music was insanely solid, voice acting really good, animation obviously very amazing. The plot and the story, it's very engaging. Again, I'm not so sure about, like, the manga side of it, but I'm sure, like, just in terms of, like, the pacing, I'm sure you could read it more as, like, a mystery novel in that way. At the end, what would I give Hyouka? I did have, like, my one little gripe, and I would still say that adds to it. So overall, Hyouka is still a solid 9 out of 10 series. I absolutely recommend it. Maybe not so much for, like, you action heavy or even romance eccentric people out there, much like myself, but more of the people who maybe like mystery stories or maybe slower, maybe not as fast-paced stories as this. Either way, this was my review of the series Hyouka. Hope you enjoyed it. Join me for many other reviews and reactions and gameplay of the like that will be coming soon in the future. So until next time, I'm Lancer. Thanks for watching.